The Suns had the most embarrassing losses of the week. We had two Cavs versus Knicks games this week, and those games are always very ugly, so those were hard to watch. The Clippers traded for he who must not be named, and somehow the Bucks look even worse this week than last. We have all that and more in this week's recap and power rankings of week 2 of the NBA season. We aren't going to waste any time, but obviously I did not watch every single game, and this video, it's my takeaways. I do it every week, every Monday. So if you want to know the power rankings of me personally, how I rank them, how I see the teams, and my overview on the teams for the week, make sure you stay tuned. But at 30, we have the Grizzlies, who finally won a game. And I'll be sharing my thoughts on them in a video during this week. I'm going to make a video on how I fix them. But yeah, they clearly lack depth, and they only have Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr., and those two have been phenomenal. It's just they're just not a good team right now, and that's why they're at 30. And then at 29, we have the Washington Wizards. We all know it. They're not very good. But let's just be honest. One of the worst weeks. The Pistons, who are at 28, they had a terrible week. Went 0-4. But I guess that's what happens when a bad Eastern Conference team plays 4 Western Conference teams this year, because we all know the West is a lot better than the East. And yeah, the Pistons went 0-4 this week, causing them to drop about 15 spots, I think, in my power rankings. Yeah, not a good week for them. I don't know if putting the Jazz at 27 is really going to age that well, but they won a game. They went 1-3 this week. Who'd they lose to? They lost to the Nuggets, Magic, and Timberwolves, but they beat the Grizzlies. But everyone beat the Grizzlies at least once this week, so that's the only one. They're 2-5 on the season, and I got them at 27. Did not watch any Jazz games, though. At 26, we have the Charlotte Hornets, and I want to read this directly from my notes. They've played good games against teams that on paper are astronomically better than them. Like the Pacers and Mavericks, I thought those two teams would beat up on them, but those were the closest games for them. And then they lost to the Nets and Rockets by 9 points or more. Like it was a weird week for the Hornets, but LaMelo Ball had a 30-point triple-double against the Mavericks. He still lost, but I know they're showing his defense highlights. That's probably his only defensive highlight of his young career so far, because he doesn't play defense like Luka. They went 1-3. They beat the Pacers, but they really can't defend. If you look at the scores for each Hornets game, they give up a lot of points. They might be as bad as the Wizards defensively. At 25, we have the Portland Trailblazers, who lost Scoot Henderson, still don't have Anthony Simons, yet somehow they managed to go 3-1 this week. And I think it's got a lot to do with the fact that Malcolm Brogdon is playing a lot of minutes now, and Shaedon Sharpe looks like a 92 overall. But more focused on Malcolm Brogdon. Brogdon is just getting his trade value increased astronomically every game. Like, he looks good. There should be a market for him. And yeah, they're at 25 because they went 3-1. And then the Rockets make it in at 24 on my power rankings. And let's give Dillon Brooks his flowers. In both of their games this week, he had a very efficient 20-point games. And judging by the box score, because I did not watch any Rockets games this week, they played the Hornets and the Kings didn't have Fox. So I didn't watch any of their games this week, and I wasn't making an effort. But if you look at the box score, it seems like they have a little more chemistry this week, and they're starting to get a balanced feel offensively, which is really optimistic. But then, obviously, I'm not going to look too much into it because, again, they played the Kings without Fox. They beat them. Good job. And then they played the Hornets. But a good sign is a good sign. They look balanced. They look like they got some chemistry. So that's a good sign. At 23, we had the Chicago Bulls. Now, I want y'all to listen to me. Against the Mavericks this week, the Bulls lost, right? Kyrie Irving did not play in that game, and Luka Doncic did not score over 20 points. And yet, the Bulls lost. And in that moment, when I saw that the Bulls lost to the Mavericks, and I saw the box score, I saw Kyrie wasn't playing, I immediately thought to myself, this is the exact moment when the Bulls need to call time of death of this team. Because they can't be losing those games and expect to compete. And the players they got, like it, they're under the expectation that they need to compete. They got DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, Vucevic, and others and they're trying to compete, but they're losing games like that. And then that's what my first thought was after I saw they lost. And then their next game, they lost to the Nets by 2. Don't think the Nets had Claxton in that game. I know for sure they didn't have Cameron Johnson though. But yeah, they lost. They just lost games they were supposed to win this week, and that's just a sign that you need to tear it down. It was not a good week for the Bulls, and I'm not impressed with them at all. They need to make some trades to actually enter a rebuild. At 22, I have the Heat, and I personally am not shocked that the Miami Heat are 2-5. Their only wins have come against the Wizards and Pistons this year. Those are 2 of the bottom 3 teams right now, in my personal eyes. Those are the only 2 games they've won. Tyler Hero looks very good, but the Heat have no depth, and Jimmy Butler and Bam have been dealing with injuries already. It's really not a surprise to see them not performing well. And this really hurts for me to say, but the Kings are at 21. No Fox, no wins. And they got... I'll give them respect. They lost by 1 point in Golden State to the Warriors, but they got demolished by the Rockets. So I really don't know what to think of them, but they dropped 11 spots, I think. They went from top 10 to 21. It was just not a good week. No promising signs from this week without Fox in my eyes. After a winless week 1, the Nets, who come in at number 20, went 3-1 this week, and the only loss came to the Celtics, so that was very optimistic. They won close games against the Heat and the Bulls, and both games were on the road and within 4 points, so you got to give them props. And then it was a good bounce back week for them, and that's why they moved up, and they're at 20 now. At 19, I have the Toronto Raptors, and I really need to say this. The Raptors are doing Pascal Siakam and themselves a disservice by not trading him, and they should have traded him at the end of last year. Because if you look at it, Scotty Barnes looks like a generational talent. He's a do-it-all player, and he is taking that step to being the main star on this team. But only problem is Siakam and him have such conflicting play styles that it's really hurting Siakam. If you look at Siakam's stats this year, they are significantly dropping off. And that's really bothersome because he's actually a really good player. It's just conflicting play styles don't work well together at times. Like Russell Westbrook and LeBron, they have conflicting play styles. It didn't work out. And that's what I'm seeing with Siakam and Barnes. But Scotty Barnes looks fabulous. He looks amazing. It's crazy. But the Raptors really need to trade Siakam. The Spurs absolutely kicked the living daylights out of my Suns this week. And then it was twice, not once. So that was a little upsetting. But I need to apologize to Victor Wembanyama. I know I was a hater when I was making my big boards. You're still number 1 on my big board. I still thought you should have gone number 1 overall. But I did have my doubts. But as long as you stay healthy, you're generational, man. So I apologize for my hateration on you. But Devin Vassell injury did come up big against the Raptors, not so much against the Suns because Wemby cooked the Suns. And then, yeah, so the Spurs moved up to 18 because they went 2-1 on the week. I think they're 3-3 on the season, and they just look better every game. The Pacers are probably the biggest fallers this week outside of my Suns. And Pacers are down to 17 because they went 1-3 this week. They played the Celtics without Halliburton. That one, as you would expect. Who else did they play this week? They lost to the Hornets. They lost to the Bulls, but they beat the Cavs. But the Cavs, that was the first game back with Jared Allen and Darius Garland. So the Pacers honestly should have went 0-4 this week. But they went 1-3, but that's why they're big fallers. Shout out Halliburton. for his 43-12 game. That was nuts. And then Miles Turner had a great game against the Cavs. But Pacers did not look good this week. This was a terrible week for them. At 16, I have the Knicks, who had a week where they lost to the Bucks and they split games with the Cavs. And the Cavs didn't have Allen or Garland for either of those games. And yeah, as I said in the intro, let's just be honest here. Cavs and Knicks games are so bad because they play the ugliest basketball against each other. And then RJ Barrett ended up playing one of the games, the one at Madison Square Garden. I don't know how the Knicks lose at Madison Square Garden when they're supposed to win there, but beat the Cavs on the road. But that's what happened this week. And yeah, it was ugly to have two of those games in a week. I get it in the playoffs, but not in the regular season. Never again. And yeah, Knicks fans, I'm really sorry about Julius Randle, but he has been atrocious this year, to say the least. And I feel for you there. I do feel for you, but it happens. Brunson cooked the Bucks, though, so that was nice to see. And then because I talked about the Knicks at 16, I have the Cavs at 15, since I can't move them. Like, they're right there. They're neck and neck with each other. Let's just be honest. And the Cavs finally got Jared Allen and Darius Garland back, and hopefully Donovan Mitchell can finally take that backpack off, because he was putting up 30 a game on like 25 shots because they had nothing else going for them in the first few games. But the Cavs beat the Warriors pretty handedly. I was expecting that. I mean, Cavs are a terrible matchup for the Warriors, and they got the job done. So props there. And the Cavs are at 15. And then at 14, I have the Magic. The Magic looked good this week. They were on the road for 3 games. They played Utah. They beat them by 2. They lost to the Lakers and Clippers in close games. And then they beat the Lakers in Orlando. So they went 2-2 on the week. But my biggest thing about watching the Magic, I watched 2 of their games this week. They cannot shoot the ball to save their lives. Like, it's bad. The Timberwolves looked pretty good this week. Anthony Edwards looked good. I think he had 2 or 3 30-point performances this week. But their Atlanta game, the Timberwolves have 79 points at half. They had finished with 113. So they scored 34 points in the second half, if that math is right in my head. 113. Yeah, I think it's 34. What happened in the second half? That's a little crazy. But then they beat the Nuggets, and by beat them, I mean they blew them out of the water. It was bad for the Nuggets. And then they blew out, who else did they play? The Jazz, I think. Yeah, they blew them out too. Cat and Edwards looked good this week, so the Timberwolves moved up. But 34 points in one half is crazy. At 12, I have the Thunder, and it's it's the West. There's only like 3 Eastern Conference teams in the top 10, and everyone else is in the West. And you look at the Thunder, they lost both of their games by a total of 6 points combined. They lost by 4 and they lost by 2. And then that was a controversial ending when they lost by 2. But it was the right call. Josh Giddey interfered first, but it's what happens. And then they lost to the Pelicans, even though I wrote this down. It was 33-14 at the end of the first quarter. The Thunder were ahead. And I thought I turned it off. I thought it was going to be a 40-point game. I watched the World Series game instead. The Pelicans somehow won. It's those games that show us that the Thunder are really young, and they still have another step they have to go to before we can put them in as contenders and stuff. And that was the game. But yeah, no SGA for a little bit too. And then my Phoenix Suns, who are canceled for at least 2 weeks. They're canceled at least 2 weeks after this week's performance. This week was pitiful. I can't look past the health anymore because Bradley Beal still hasn't played. Devin Booker's only played 2 games this year, and he's got 2 different injuries. Kevin Durant's playing more minutes than LeBron right now, and LeBron's playing too many minutes. So I look at my Suns. They are down to 11. They went from 1 to 11. It's bad. It did not look good at all this week. I watched 2 games, and you look terrible in both of them. And the one game we won was against the Pistons. Kevin Durant had 41 points. It took 41 points for us to beat the Pistons. Inexcusable. Canceled for 2 weeks. We better win the in-season tournament, and that's how we get uncanceled. Make it to the Final Four. But this was a tragic week as a Suns fan. I'm embarrassed. And I know I had them at number 1 over the Nuggets last week. Yeah, feel free to clown me all you want. We all have our fandom. We all have bias for our teams. I'm a Suns fan. I'm biased for my team. Clown me all you want. That was terrible. I looked very dumb for what I said last week, having them at 1. That was not it. And then at 10, the Clippers. They dropped 1 spot because they lost to the Lakers, and I had them ahead of the Lakers last week. They lost to the Lakers. Now they just got James Harden now, so yeah. But I'm not gonna jump in and put them in the top 5 just because they got James Harden. I need to see it first. There's still a lot of chemistry that needs to be built up and stuff like that. So I'm not going to jump the gun and put them in the top 5 like a lot of power rankings I've seen have. But if they look good this week, they definitely will make a case. But yeah, they're at 10. And then at 9, I have the Lakers. The Lakers role players have really struggled this year. We all know it. D'Angelo Russell has been pretty good, though. From what I've seen in live games. Like, he looked good against Magic and the Clippers. But they have LeBron and AD both playing 35-plus minutes a game. AD can do that. LeBron can't because he's going to get worn down due to age. AD will probably get worn down, too. So the role players really need to step up so they can stop playing those two so many minutes to save them for the postseason. But the Lakers did win. They did have a good week. So, yeah, they find themselves at 9 this week. And they'll move up as soon as I see the role players playing well. We can't rely on that right now. And then at 8, I have the Pelicans. They don't change. They were 8 last week. They're still 8 this week. They went 2-2 this week. Their losses, Hawks and Warriors. And both of those teams are ranked ahead of them right now. So you let it slide. That's in my opinion, though. But the Pelicans have been dealing with injuries. McCollum has a collapsed lung. Zion and Ingram have been in and out. But the role players have looked really good, like the bench players. So even though they've been hurt, they've still been able to maintain 500. They're 4-2 right now. They went 2-2 this week. So they've been looking pretty good. And then Trey Murphy and Jose Alvarado still haven't played yet this year. So this team looks good. And until like Zion or Ingram or McCollum get season-ending injuries and they start to look really bad, at that point they'll drop. But as for right now, I like them at 8. The biggest riser of the week, the Atlanta Hawks. They went 3-0 this week. And if you watched any of the games, you could see some sort of balance being struck upon them offensively. Like, they're starting to look comfortable playing together, specifically Murray and Trae Young. I mean, that's going to be weird forever. I don't think they're a good backcourt together. That's just my personal opinion. But DeJounte Murray looked really good. He had a 41-point game, and they went against the Timberwolves. But they beat the T-Wolves, Pelicans, and Wizards this week, all convincingly. So that's why they're up so much. But I could have put them too high. But for now, I like the Hawks as the 3rd best team in the East. 4th best team in the East, sorry. At 6, I have the Bucks, who officially fall out the top 5. And it's really weird. Their wins, they beat the Heat, 76ers, and who was the other? And the Knicks. Those are 3 teams that I look at on paper, and they're like, all right, they're quality teams. But they lost by 20 points to the Raptors and Hawks, who last week weren't even in the top 20, neither of them. So I'm like, what's going on here? Like, it's really weird, you ask me, the Bucks. It's growing pains. And the fact that they don't have anyone good to defend anybody on the perimeter, that's where they get cooked. Like, any team with a good guard really hurts them. And yeah, all their wins have been close games, and all their losses have been blowout games. Because in close games, you got Dame time and you got Giannis unstoppable. But if the game's not close, they can't win. and because they can't stop anybody. Simple as that. And then the first team in the top 5, we have the Dallas Mavericks. I do not enjoy saying that at all, but I watched their game against the Nuggets. If Luka cared about his defense as much as he cared about complaining to the refs, they would have won the game, because he was complaining to the refs after a turnover or a missed shot, right? And they gave up easy transition points, and the game was in reach. Like, the whole game was in reach for the Mavericks, but they gave up all them transition points. That's where they lost the game. So if he were to care more, they would have won that game. And because that's the only game I've watched of them this year, except for the game against the Spurs, I have to put them in top 5. But they still haven't played anybody. They don't have my respect yet, but as a basketball fan and as someone that loves basketball and knows the game of basketball, you have to put them top 5 at this point, unfortunately. And at 4, I had the 76ers. And let me just say, the 76ers look as good as they have since 2019. Their chemistry is there. They're playing really well. Kelly Oubre, Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris looks comfortable, and that's really important. They got those 4 players. Then DeAnthony Melton, Patrick Beverly, B-Ball, Paul Reed, other bench pieces. They just got Robert Covington and Marcus Morris. Like, they have so much depth now that they can win with just 2 stars. And Kelly Oubre averaged 20 points a game last year. Tobias Harris is a 20 points per game scorer. So they're not going to have a problem scoring the ball at all. And their defense is good. The 76ers are legit. Don't sleep on the 76ers. They look very, very good this year. And they're number 4 this year. So as of right now, they're the 4th best team in the NBA. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I debated putting them at 3. But at 3, I have the Golden State Warriors. Warriors ball movement is indeed back. The Warriors look very, very good. They look exciting. They have depth. Everyone looks good. They lost to the Cavs this week as their only loss, but it's a terrible matchup. Evan Mobley and Jared Allen played. They're not going to win against those two with Draymond Green and Kevon Looney as their bigs. It's just not happening. But that was their only loss this week. They're 5-2 on the season still. They look very, very good. The Warriors' ball movement is so crisp. It's nice to watch the Warriors when they're good and playing good basketball. Klay Thompson's good this year. It's been beautiful to watch, and they're the 3rd best team in the NBA, 2nd best team in the West in my eyes. And then number 2, it's the same as last week for the Nuggets. They lost to the Timberwolves this week. They got blown out by them. Jamal Murray went down with a hamstring injury, I believe. I saw it. He didn't look very good. I really want to know what the status is with him before I say anything about Denver falling down. But from what I saw last week, no. They're still the top 2 team. They just got their butts kicked by the Timberwolves. But they beat the Mavericks, and they beat... Who else did they beat? Yeah, I don't even know who else they beat. But they're the 2nd best team in the NBA right now. They look good. Not going to argue with it. I should have had them at 1 last week. I'll admit. I'm sorry. But at number 1 this week, the Boston Celtics. I am not a Boston Celtics fan at all. I'll root for them against certain teams, but not right now. But the Celtics, they demolished the Pacers, and they cooked the Wizards, as you'd expect. No Halliburton for the Pacers either. And they beat the Nets by 10 in their most competitive game. And you look at it, their chemistry is just only beginning to get there. Drew Holiday, Porzingis, Tatum, Brown. They're the best team in the NBA, and it's not really close at this point. We do need to see them play against the Nuggets before we can conclude that. But I don't have... There's a lot of pain in saying that the Celtics are the best team in the NBA for me. But I got to give them their respect. They're beating everybody badly. So yeah, and that's going to be the video. As I said before, Grizzlies video coming out sometime this week. And stay tuned for next week's power rankings. And yeah, my Suns are canceled for 2 weeks. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to watch last week's controversial power rankings, click on this video right here. And have a good one. Bye.